Welcome into Outkick the Show. I am your fearless leader, Clay Travis, and I hope all of you had fantastic weekends. Even though for a lot of people it was a very challenging weekend, no matter where you may be across the country, we're going to get to that. Off the top here, I got what I think is good news that has suddenly disappeared, all right? There are all sorts of things going on in the coronavirus universe. But maybe the most remarkable thing is all of the protests, which turned into riots in many different places, knocked, whether it's MSNBC, CNN, Fox News, all of them just suddenly stopped covering the coronavirus. I don't know if you noticed this. I couldn't believe it. I don't watch a lot of national news or local news for that matter. I don't watch a lot of TV other than live sports, my own shows, things like that I watch on television. But a lot of times I'm watching Netflix or whatever else. This is unbelievable. When you actually look at CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News after months of having a ticker analyzing every new case, the worldwide infection rate, the number of deaths, it just disappeared right off of the screens in the space of one weekend. I don't know what happened. I guess maybe the coronavirus, suddenly people were like, oh, everybody's done with the coronavirus. And they moved right on to the new controversy, which was the protests and the riots. But let me give you some positive news, because I've been talking about the coronavirus right now. And I'm not going to stop talking about the coronavirus just because all of the news has suddenly become so positive that the media has stopped covering it. All right. So cases, infections, deaths, they're all declining massively. All right. I'm going to go over to Europe. In Europe on Sunday, there were less than 1,000 cases in new cases in Italy, France, Germany, and Spain combined. And one of the top doctors in Italy came out and he said, based on all of the coronavirus that he's seeing, suddenly the overall devastation of the virus has declined and they're not seeing very substantial impact from the coronavirus in Italy anymore at all. Now, and he's not afraid of there being a quote unquote second wave. That's a story. You can go read it. I tweeted it out. In the United States, cases have collapsed in terms of deaths. I want to use Georgia in particular. I want to speak about Georgia in particular. This is interesting, all right? Georgia, on May 1st, everybody came out and said, hey, look at what's going on in Georgia. Things are going to fall apart. The Atlantic ran that headline where they talked about how now it was going to be basically a carnival of death, right? Like all that was out there. And since May 1st, according to Governor Brian Kemp, who tweeted this yesterday, cases, hospitalizations in particular, are down nearly half, right around 40% on hospitalizations since the state of Georgia opened up. ABC dove in, all right, to the overall situation. ABC dove into the situation and they said, wait a minute, what's going on here? They looked at all 21 states that had opened up, and the reality was all of them had seen declines in cases, all right? There is no longer any argument anywhere in the country that everything shouldn't be back open, all right? Everybody should be back at work. Everybody should be back who is young and healthy. We need to continue to protect nursing homes where probably over half of all deaths have occurred. But everybody should be back to work. If you're watching this right now in Michigan, in Pennsylvania, in Illinois, my Big Ten brethren, you should be able to get out and circulate and live your life. That's what I've been arguing for weeks. I've been living what I am preaching to everybody else. I went down to Florida. Florida is open. The beaches are lovely. You can now go rent hotel rooms. You can go down there and you can stay in condos and houses, short-term rentals, everything else. It is all back up and running. I live the life that I tell you guys to take advantage of. And that's why I was out in East Tennessee this weekend with my family at my in-laws' house, visited them for the first time since the whole coronavirus thing broke out. I got to tell you, I spent Saturday on a jet ski with Bojangles, went in and spent a ton of money at Bojangles, got as much fried chicken as I could, had a bunch of beer, and lived a East Tennessee redneck Saturday. Jet skis, fried chicken, and beer. It was glorious. Was out on the lake up there with the TVA Lakes. My 9-year-old considers Bojangles to be the greatest restaurant on the planet. All right. After we went, I took my 9-year-old to the LSU Bama game. Greatest game of the year last year, I really do believe. And after the game, he's sitting there in his Julio Jones jersey and he's upset. And we're hanging out. And I said, okay, bud, you can eat anywhere you want. I'll take you to any restaurant. You and me, it's just the two of us. We're driving back from Tuscaloosa. We got a hotel just outside of Birmingham. He wants to stay there with me. I said, what do you want to do tonight, bud? You get to pick. He said, Dad, I want to go to Bojangles and Taco Bell. I want to go through the drive-thru. They're right side by side. And I want to go back to the hotel room and watch college football for the rest of the night. And I said, you know what? It doesn't get any better than when your 9-year-old is like, let's go get some fried chicken and some tacos, go back to the hotel after spending the whole day watching college football and hang out, kick up our feet, and watch college football for the rest of the night. I got to tell you, I will remember that for the rest of my life, my 9-year-old. And we watched Tennessee beat Kentucky that night, among other games. And so we had an incredible time. Other than the Alabama fan aspect, I definitely felt like in that moment in time, I am raising this kid right. Let's go get some fried chicken. Let's go get some tacos, Taco Bell, Bojangles. Let's go back to the hotel. Let's kick our feet up and let's watch games. And that's what we did on that Saturday. It was pretty fantastic. NPR on the coronavirus front. NPR. When NPR starts acknowledging things, the ship has sailed. NPR has acknowledged that the coronavirus is not that dangerous based on the antibody data. Where have you been in NPR for the last month? They finally got out and said that. You can go read that report from NPR as well. And I tweeted that one out also. But this is all a sign, in addition to the fact that it suddenly has disappeared from Fox News, from CNN, and from MSNBC, and they have now pivoted to a new fear, all right? And some people have not been happy with me, right? I don't presume that everybody has to have the exact same opinions as me. This is important, okay? Because I think it really characterizes the essence of society in America today, all right? And I wrote this down because I think it's important. We're all entitled to our own opinions, but we are not all entitled to our own facts. And I remain, if you go listen to the podcast of the radio program this morning, I thought we did a really fantastic job as a crew. Most listened to month of podcast ever. Go subscribe to the Outkick podcast. But I want to say that again because I think it's really important. We're all entitled to our own opinions, but we are not all entitled to our own facts. And one of the things that troubles me immensely about the way media covers stories, and frankly, the way politicians respond to those stories, is many people do not actually look at the data to formulate their opinions. They formulate their opinions based on emotion. Look, emotion is powerful. And I sometimes get criticized. My wife will even say that sometimes I'm like Dr. Spock, right? I'm not the person who's going to get into a screaming argument most of the time. I don't have a high temper. I'm not the person who's running around breaking things when they get angry, other than when the University of Tennessee doesn't play. It's really the only time I let go of my emotions. If you guys ever watch these games or watch these shows, I lose my emotions with the Titans and with the University of Tennessee athletics. That's pretty much it. And sometimes when I'm coaching, all right? Sometimes when I'm coaching sports, I lose my emotions. Basically, I'm really competitive, but most of the time, unless I'm in a competition, that doesn't reveal itself. And it doesn't even reveal itself that much when I'm actually competing. It's when I'm having to watch other people compete and they're doing things that are driving me crazy. This is what I talk about. Like, I coach my son's little leagues. I'm like, no, what are you doing? Have you ever tried to coach little kids? Like sometimes they listen, sometimes they don't. And you're just like, no. This is unbelievable. Like, what's going on, right? And so by and large, though, when it comes to actually serious things, I look at the data. And I'm not saying that I'm perfect when my opinions are analyzed. I'm certainly not saying I'm perfect when you look at predictions, right? But almost all of my corona analysis has been 100% factual. The only things that weren't factual were things that were reported to be true, and then they ended up not being true. And I came on with you guys and I talked about it. I said, I apologize. I listened to the reports out of China. I listened to the World Health Organization. I shouldn't have listened to them. The facts that they tried to share were not actually facts, okay? And so this is, I think, a really important deal because a lot of people have lost the ability to distinguish between facts and opinions. And so the media plays now almost exclusively on every angle, by and large, to emotions, okay? By and large, the media is trying to get viewers to be emotionally engaged. Social media is for many people almost entirely an emotional medium. People react emotionally all the time. As Benjamin Franklin said, though, the danger is passion governs and she rarely governs wisely. Okay? That's a great quote from Benjamin Franklin back in the day. That's the whole reason why we have separation of powers in this country, to try to avoid from emotion leading to somebody being able to take over the country and become a totalitarian. That's why we have separation of powers. If you study anything in the universe of the foundation of our government, right? Go read the Federalist Papers. If you study anything relating to American history as to how our government was built. And so I see a direct connection between the coronavirus disappearing from our television screens and suddenly the protest coming onto our commercial television screens. And both of them are emotionally related telecasts that are not necessarily predicated in fact. I've been sharing the data on the coronavirus with you from the get-go, and the fact that almost everybody out there has absolutely nothing to fear from the actual coronavirus, right? Almost no one who is young and healthy has anything to fear from the coronavirus. These are not crazy, outlandish comments. This is what the data reflects, okay? Yet we shut down the entire country and cost over 40 million people their jobs, plus probably 100 million people had to take substantial pay cuts. So when you actually look in the data, okay, when you look at the data never reflected this made any sense at all. It was an emotional-based response. And so if you are looking at the data on protests, it is awful that anybody ever loses their life who has done nothing wrong and doesn't deserve to lose their life. But we have to be careful of is that we don't allow the emotion of legitimate anger to overwhelm the appropriate and necessary responses. All right? And so here's data. I talked about coronavirus data I've been sharing with you from the get-go. This is from 2019, Washington Post. 41 people who were unarmed were shot and killed by police in 2019. Okay? Remember, unarmed does not mean without danger. You can be trying to take a police officer's gun. You can be punching, kicking, standing over them. You can be choking someone to death when a police officer arrives. One of the most important things I've ever done. I really do believe this. As a part of being a young lawyer, I went out and I spent time riding with a police officer on a Saturday night, one night. You can do ride-alongs. I don't know, do they still allow ride-alongs? I think if you're a young lawyer or you're interested in the criminal justice system, it's an invaluable thing to do, because what it allows you to do is actually see what a police officer deals with on a night in and night out basis. And I've seen a lot of different sports teams make the decision, hey, I want you to understand what the police are going through. I'm going to take my guys and put them with the police and let them drive around and see what they deal with on a night-to-night basis. If you do that for one night, you will have so much more of an understanding about the difficulty of the job related to being a police officer than you have ever done in your entire life. So one of the things that I worry about is social media's tendency to create absolutes. Somebody is either the devil or they're a saint, right? Somebody is either good or they are evil. The reality is, it doesn't matter what profession, doctor, lawyer, engineer, police officer, store clerk, everybody out there, regardless of your profession, there are people who aren't very good at their jobs, not trustworthy, and make mistakes. When police make mistakes, they should be punished just as regular citizens are punished. But the reality is, the vast, vast majority of police are saving infinitely more lives than they are costing. And what I worry is, in the same way that our emotional response to the coronavirus, I believe, was more destructive than the coronavirus itself, what I worry about is our emotional response to injustice, and yes, racism, is oftentimes leading to more destructive results than if we tried to respond constructively by looking at the data. And here's the data, 2019. Some people get mad when you share facts. Like, some people are mad at me. Like, why are you sharing facts when I'm upset, my emotions are frayed, I'm so angry right now? Well, I think that's when facts matter the most. People may not all listen, but if some people start to take a pause and listen and think, it can lead to better decisions. Look, I've been young and dumb teenage boy. Every single person who is here listening to me right now remembers how dumb you could be at 16 and 17 years old. And so if you can reach those kids with facts, some of them can be persuaded not to follow along with what I think are people who were embedding themselves in the protest to try to wreak havoc. And I'm going to get to that in a sec. But here's the data. 2019, 41 unarmed people shot and killed by police. 19 of them were white. 9 of them were black. 6 of them were Hispanic. There were others, and there were mixed race people in there as well. But the majority of people who were shot and killed by police who were unarmed in 2019 were white. 78% of all people who were shot and killed by police and were unarmed were not black. In other words, black people were 22%. All right. Those are the data most recently that we have from 2019. I think those matter. All right. Now let's go into the protests themselves. I am a First Amendment absolutist. I support the right of everyone on the planet to have the ability to actually go out and support any cause that they believe in, right? As a totality, all right? Some people, there's always per capita people, all right? Let me explain this. When you look at the data, first of all, it almost never happens that if you are unarmed, that you're going to be shot and killed by police. All right, let's start there. I'm going to go back into it, all right? More people were killed by bees, wasps, and hornets in 2019 than were unarmed and killed by police, okay? Regardless of your race, your gender, your ethnicity, your sexuality. Almost all of the people being shot by police are men. So we're not going to see a perfect statistical approximation of the population because your grandma probably doesn't have very many violent interactions with police. Women represent a tiny percentage of people who are shot by police, even though they represent the majority of the population. That's not because police are sexist against men. It's because most women don't commit violent crime, and so they don't end up being involved in violent crime investigations or situations such as those. So roughly, if you look at the overall percentages, the percentage in which you commit violent crime, and I'm saying violent crime because there are lots of low-level offenses that I don't think should be crimes. For instance, I don't think the drug war has made a lot of sense by and large. So if you look at the data, I don't think it makes sense to be spending trillions of dollars like we have prosecuting non-violent drug offenses and trying to keep marijuana, let's say, off the streets, right? So I'm taking non-violent offenses out of the equation, just looking at violent crime. The rate of police shootings is nearly identical to the rate of violent crime charges. So everyone doesn't commit violent crimes at the same rate. The rate in which police shoot people, which is unfortunate, but the rate in which that occurs is almost directly proportionate to the rate at which violent crime is committed, okay? That's the factual analysis. So you can't look at the overall per capita data on the nation because you immediately have to throw out all women. Men are vastly more likely to be shot than women are. Men between the ages of 16 and 40 are vastly more likely to be shot than men between the ages of 40 and 100, right? The most violent perpetrators in America today, and I think this is true, I would imagine, around the world in general, is men, and I'm defining men broadly because there's some underage men here, from about 16 to 40. That's almost all crime in the world. Men ages 16 to 40. Doesn't mean some men over 40 aren't committing crimes. Doesn't mean some women aren't committing crimes. But if you actually look at the data, that's the way the data breaks down. Now, I'm going to go into the protest. What frustrates me about the protest as a First Amendment absolutist is it seems clear to me that there were lots of people who were not there to protest. They were there to riot and they were there to loot. And most of the people who were there to riot and loot were not the normal, quote, protesters, not the majority of protesters that were showing up all over the country to voice their displeasure. Again, as a First Amendment absolutist, I respect the fact that you have the right to voice any opinion, even if it's different than mine. But I want you to think about this. I'm only going to talk about Nashville in particular because I know this city, it's where I live. Nashville, even before it got dark, they finally got this guy, but there were multiple guys with crowbars beating out the windows and trying to burn down our city hall. The police were not there to combat these guys. If you show up for a protest against police violence with a crowbar, you are not someone who is looking for a peaceful protest. You came there to create a riot, okay? And I think there are many people in Antifa that for whatever reason, most haven't been willing to acknowledge, have tried to infiltrate these protests and create a opportunity to riot and pillage. And what I am upset about in Nashville in particular is that our mayor, John Cooper, wasn't prepared for these infidels, for these jerks, for these felons to come out and try to take over a protest and turn it into an opportunity to loot and pillage. There was plenty of evidence that that had already happened by the time Nashville had their protest on Saturday. Every police officer should have been there on the streets. Every single National Guard troop should have already been called out. There should have been sufficient force to avoid this ever transpiring in the city of Nashville, a city that I'm born in, went to public school in K through 12, graduated from a high school named after Martin Luther King, right down the road from where that Nashville City Hall is. Everybody should have been prepared for that scenario, and they weren't. And as a result, that really, really was a failure by the mayor, okay? The mayor collapsed and did an incredibly bad job. Furthermore, I just want to follow along on the logic track here. I talked about the intersection of the coronavirus and protests and how they were connected at fear and how the media had jumped from one fear to another. No one has explained to me the logic behind which a city like Nashville can't have more than 25 people in one place. And if anybody showed up to protest the lockdown, the blue check marks on Twitter lost their mind and said, oh my God, there's going to be a huge spike in coronavirus infections now because protesters showed up. Of course, those spikes never arrive, but as soon as tens of thousands of people want to show up and protest in your city, there's no lockdown issues at all anymore. All of these jobs and all these businesses that haven't been allowed to open because of the rules from city and state officials, and all of a sudden, the protest can have tens of thousands of people in close proximity flooding the area, and you won't allow other places, other businesses where people have been fighting for their entire lives to try to make a living and you're still not allowing them to open back up, it doesn't make any sense to me. It's not logically consistent at all. And so as a result, this is, I believe, a fundamental failure on many levels. This was very foreseeable. And I want to say this. I talked about doing the ride along with police before. I actually think you have to deserve and give a lot of credit to police and to the National Guard for the way they responded in incredibly difficult scenarios where they basically had oftentimes no leadership, where they were being pummeled with rocks. There were things being lit on fire. There were things being thrown at them. There were a lot, things blowing up everywhere. And those guys actually were there, and girls, protecting the city as best they can, following the orders of the people who sent them in there, even if oftentimes the leadership had not done a good enough job of preparing them for that situation. So I'm disappointed that we allowed what should be at the very essence of the First Amendment. I support the right of people to protest lockdowns. I support the right of people to protest injustice. I support the right of anyone in America to protest any issue for any reason in their private free time. Inevitably, when I say that, people are like, you didn't support Colin Kaepernick? Yeah, I didn't support Colin Kaepernick because he protested in uniform at work. You don't have the right to protest in uniform at work anywhere. I mean, that's lunacy, right? If you walked into Walmart and you went to check out and the woman, when you checked out, said abortion is murder, it would be within your rights to be like, hey, I'm just trying to buy some Diet Dr. Pepper. I don't really want to get drawn into an abortion debate with my cashier at Walmart. If you went into McDonald's and you bought a hamburger and the person at the counter said, actually, meat is murder, you should get the salad instead. I'm like, I don't need dietary advice from a cashier at McDonald's. You're entitled to have whatever opinion in your private life that you want. But at work, when you are being paid, I'm not entitled to subsidize your ability to say whatever you want while I'm paying you. Sorry, I'm an employer. I've got a lot of different employees. They have the right. We're in a little bit of a unique job because we're in the opinion business. But they don't have the right to publish things that I disagree with on my site. I mean, this is not crazy. Like, I am the business owner. As the person who cuts the paychecks, I have control over what we publish on a day-to-day basis. That's different. Outside of working for me, they can do whatever they want within the law. As a First Amendment absolutist, I 100% support their right to do whatever they want, but I don't have to pay them to support their political opinions. Does that make sense? It should be an easy distinction, but a lot of people can't find it. So that is where we are. All right. Some positive news in the world of sports. Iowa has brought back high school baseball and high school softball today. Props to the governor of Iowa. Props to the state of Iowa for bringing back high school sports. Iowa, high school softball and baseball is able to be back training before Major League Baseball can get this worked out. Some people are like, well, Major League Baseball is a much bigger business. Yeah. And a much bigger business has a lot more money to be made and a lot more at stake than Iowa high school baseball and softball. If Iowa high school and baseball don't play, really the overall impact from a dollars and cents perspective is almost nothing. Major League Baseball, if they had just been somewhat competent, could have, it appears, had the whole month of June with no competition and the whole month of July with no competition. Now I question whether they're even going to be able to have a season. Props to Iowa for getting it done, but this is not a health-related concern anymore. They have to be able to figure this out. This is insanely easy, all right? It is insanely easy to figure out. Finally, I want to give props to John Jones and Chuck Liddell, two UFC guys who were out trying to stop vandalism from protesters and looting. And obviously you don't want to mess with a UFC fighter. John Jones took away a spray can from somebody who was vandalizing. Chuck Liddell broke up fights. I got to give those guys credit for not just sitting around on a Twitter feed and saying things, but for actually being out there in the streets. Finally, J.R. Smith. I don't know if you guys saw this story, but J.R. Smith, somebody made the mistake of trying to vandalize J.R. Smith's car in L.A., and he was not happy about it at all. That video went out there. Somebody just said, I'm just looking over at the comments for the first time, moral of the story, don't mess with J.R. Smith's car. That is indeed a good moral to the story. But looters and vandalizers, I was glad that they went and caught the guy who tried to burn down the Nashville City Hall. It was unacceptable that he ever got close enough to attempt that. But thankfully, I'm glad that they grabbed him. I hope they'll be able to review a lot of the different videos and track down many different people to charge them who were instigators in setting forth that riot and the vandalization. And honestly, if you think about it, lots of young people are susceptible to what a crowd does. This is what I was saying earlier. When you're 16, 17 years old, a lot of times you end up doing what other people around you do. And so these guys, they were antagonists. They were setting off the violence. They weren't actual protesters. They need to be found. I saw the picture. I tweeted it out of the guy who tried to burn down City Hall in Nashville. I'm glad they got him. Cities and states all over the country need to be able and willing to do the exact same thing to grab those guys and put them into prison. All right? Final thoughts. Final thoughts in general here. I appreciate all of you. Thanks again for making Outkick as successful as it was in May, the biggest and the best that there possibly is in the world of podcasts. We are joining and growing at a rapid rate. May was the best month we've ever had, following April, which was the best month that we've ever had, following March, which was the best month that we ever had. While many audiences out there are collapsing, we are absolutely dominating. And so that's because of you guys. Share the show. I appreciate all of you. I'm not the kind of person who sits around and worries about what other people say. I look at the facts. I stick to what I believe, and I don't really care what anybody else thinks. As I said before, we're all entitled to our own opinions, but we aren't all entitled to our own facts. I think facts matter in a big way. A lot of you do as well. It's why our audience is surging. And it's why if you could buy stock in anything other than sports gambling companies right now, you should be buying stock in Outkick, because we're growing fast, adding a lot of talent, and we are going to continue to surge. I appreciate all of you. Corona Bros officially giving up the ghost this weekend. Media has almost completely moved on from the coronavirus, but I'm going to keep updating you on it because I want you all to recognize what's going on, which is one fear has moved to another fear. And in the process, facts oftentimes get left completely behind. I appreciate all of you. I appreciate all of you. And I want you to know we're going to have another season of Lock It In coming back soon as sports are re-announced. Your boy will be back on television and we'll be back rolling with gambling picks once more. Lots of good stuff coming. I think we're going to have the busiest July to February that you have ever seen in the history of sports, honestly. From July all the way through the Super Bowl, it's going to be a lot of fun. It's going to have a lot of fun on Lock It In. I appreciate all of you. My name is Clay Travis. I want you to DBAP unless you need to SBAP. See you guys. Bye. Love you. Thank you, Facebook. See y'all.